Hi, my name is Sarnam Mark Greenberg, and today I'm going to talk about the three selves that I have observed and been working with. This really started when someone asked me, why did you come here? Why did you come to Earth? And I took that very seriously, and so I went way into the woods. I spent a lot of time in nature and really meditated to go as deep as I could into myself to answer that question from the deepest part of myself I could find. And for me, that was here in my heart-centered awareness. That's where at the heart, that's where I identify something like the soul, something that I would call this primary self, that the one who incarnated, the one who's had many different lifetimes or incarnations. And so I really that was maybe the biggest time where I really tuned into that part of myself and was asking, because my consciousness still felt like it was up here. It was almost like I was asking, why did you come here? It literally, even though I knew it was my primary self, it felt like a separate self. It felt not primary. This is the one in my head that I had been identifying with, and that's although I had spent some time already, you know, developing trust and communication between the heart and the mind, and also between the two sides of the mind, the right brain and the left brain. That was when I really became aware that, not only uh, that I wasn't thinking of this as my primary self, but when I was asked a big question, that was where I wanted to go, to this part, and it gave me much different answers than my brain or my conscious or rational mind would have thought. Okay, it was surprising to me. It was like I was gaining new insights about myself by identifying with that part of myself. And although I was identifying with it, I still was not thinking of this as my primary I. If I was to ask, who am I? My consciousness would still go up here. That was when I realized that there were literally three different selves who I could ask, who am I? There was this one, the primary self, but it didn't feel primary. It felt like the more hidden self. The primary one felt like this dominant personality up in my head, which was mostly identified with the left brain, which is the right side, with reason, with logic, with thinking, with language. This is the part I've been trained to use and trained to rely on. And then the other side, the left side, the intuitive part, the non-logical, the feeling part of me, the part that's attuned with the other feeling parts of the body, like the gut, brain, and the heart. Um, this was the non-dominant personality. I had to really look for this side to communicate with it, but it had different sense of the world. It literally was perceiving the world in a completely different way than the logical part. This part, along with everything else, is also looking out for danger, trying to protect whatever it viewed as the sense of self. And this part, much more receptive, much more just taking in the world in a feeling way. I would especially notice that if I walked in the woods and I tried to see the world through my left eye, through my right brain, everything was so much more full. What a much more feeling sense. Psychic abilities also here. So that's when I started understanding that there were really three selves I could work with. This right side or left brain, the left side or the right brain, and then this primary self, that what I would call the soul, that at first is just hidden. It's hidden because of all the interactions going on up here that occupy your attention. And so that was the beginning of my process. So that also is what started me to tune in more and more to this primary self, the heart-centered awareness. And the more I tuned into it, the more I started feeling amazing heart openings, much bigger than anything I imagined was possible for me, and an emergence of this love that was beyond my normal sense of love, what I would call divine love, where it's something like love and power, a radiance, an opening and a radiance and a connection, not with things that were far beyond my limited sense of self. What you might say the larger universe, a feeling of oneness, which led to more of a feeling of communion or connection with other people. Um, so much enhanced experience. And the more I've tuned into this, especially through this solstice period, the more I've tuned into this heart centered awareness, the more I've started to identify with it. Um, the more I can say, who am I, and feel like it actually comes, it actually is here and not just up here. What happens is that these two, the dominant and the non-dominant personality, start to kind of merge or feel more one with this primary soul essence. And from that, I've also gained the realization that these two that we rely on, that we where we spend most of our time, actually grew out of this soul essence coming in to the fetus in the womb in utero and merging with a physiology that has a split brain. So when this unified consciousness merged with a physiology that has a split brain, then these two selves, or you might say the appearance of two selves, grew out of that, because it's what happens when consciousness is merging with a physiology like this, where not just sensations are coming through the eyes and the ears and kind of limited um, organs of perception, but the awareness of the perception of what the world is coming in two very distinctly different ways, through this more rational, logical thinking mind and through this more intuitive feeling mind. So it literally feels like there are two different selves. We don't usually think that way because we're so identified with the dominant personality, which for most people is going to be that rational side, and the intuitive side. It's communicating with it's interfacing with it. That it's not completely shut out, but most of that interaction is happening unconsciously. So to bring the intuitive side back, you might say, to its rightful place, because it also has been suppressed in our culture. We're taught to use our rational mind to literally dominate the intuitive side, to that this one is going to be more right, more correct. We're taught that in school, that so there is a process of just allowing that intuitive self to come back up and take its rightful place. It's literally half of who you are, so that the two parts can communicate freely and trust each other. That's a big thing, just getting them to trust each other so they can communicate. And then, so that's the process I went through before I really started tuning into this even more primary self, the soul essence in the heart. So now you've got three selves that are really all part of one self that's centered in the heart, that's less apparent. And these two having emerged from it, but after growing up and going through our society, you can completely lose awareness of this self. There's many people who don't think they have a soul. You can be an atheist, because your consciousness gets so identified with this primary intellectual personality. And so, yeah, I wanted to share that insight because there's something that just naturally happens from bringing. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It doesn't take force. You don't have to kill the ego. You don't have to do these drastic things that sometimes you hear in other spiritual paths. You just have to bring awareness into this heart-centered self. And the more awareness you give it, it just naturally starts to expand. You start feeling more light. You start feeling more love. You start feeling a whole different self than what you're used to emerging. And then these two don't disappear, but they merge, so that there's a realization that these two are an outgrowth, or are an extension, you might say, of this one self as it's interfacing with this split brain physiology. And that changes. That changes. That's changed how I'm relating to the world. It's it's changed my perception of reality, and it's also changed um, how I am desiring to be a part of this world. So it's a pretty significant realization, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, because it's not really very hard to do. And, it's not something you have to do with a lot of force, or it doesn't take any force. It's just awareness and self-love. Again, because part of what makes it all work is bringing self-love back into this repressed and dominated non-dominant personality, the intuitive side. Usually there's a lot of need for love and acceptance here in most people, because almost every upbringing, even with the nicest parents, because they're preparing you for school, teaches you to use your logical, rational mind and to basically subjugate and repress this intuitive, non-rational part. And really, that's not that creates to a dysfunctional human and a dysfunctional world. We're living in a dysfunctional world because of that. So when you bring basically, it's a process of bringing self-love back into this part of yourself where love is. When you're taught as a little kid that some part of you is not acceptable, you're basically being taught that that part does not receive love, and you stop loving that part of yourself. So you have to bring love back into that part to bring these two halves into equality, so they can communicate and trust each other. And then it becomes much easier to realize the unified self that they both grew out of. So that's the process that I've been working on for some time to get to this point. I just wanted to share this part because I haven't heard it shared in any other spiritual tradition, these three selves, but they are really distinct. They're really easy to relate to. And when you start looking at yourself that way, it makes it so easy to drop in to this primary self. It's just right there. Okay, so I wanted to share that much with you, and I hope it's helpful to you on your spiritual path. Many blessings. Bye bye.